everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Make Your Child the Celebrity of Your British Boarding School Choice. I'd like to start off by just saying thank you really for making the time to be with me during this session. I know how busy parents like you are, and so I really do appreciate you making some time to spend with me while I share some of my insights with you. Just a little tip, at the end of the webinar I'm going to share with you an offer which I believe will really help you with the process of researching and applying to British boarding schools. So grab yourself a coffee now, put your feet up while I share some insights with you, and then when we get to the end I'll tell you a little bit more about the special webinar offer that I've got available for you. So let's not waste any more time and let's get on with our webinar. So here we go. What we're going to talk about today is how to make your child the celebrity of your British boarding school choice. And the aim really is to look at the whole start of the process and help you to turn confusion into clarity so that you have a plan for a way forward. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. I suggest you might want to have a look at your screen size, make sure it is adjusted so that you can see the information I'm sharing with you correctly. Be sure your volume is up so that you can hear me. Perhaps turn your mobile phone to silent so that you won't be disturbed. And depending on what you are watching the webinar on, iPad, iPhone or a PC, then look at the settings to make sure that you can see the information that I'm sharing with you correctly. So just a few little facts to start us off, which are taken from the Independent School Council census of 2020. This is the organisation that represents over 1,300 independent schools in the UK. So in the 2020 census, there were 474 schools that have boarders, and within those schools, just under 70,000 children are boarders. And just under 30,000 of those boarders have parents who live overseas. So it's not surprising really that some parents find it quite a challenge to look at boarding school choices because there are an awful lot of options available, which is great because it gives you a fantastic range of schools to look at according to what you believe will be suitable for your child. But it also can create a bit of a challenge and a bit of confusion because there are so many options available to you. It can be hard to see the wood for the trees. So that's what I'm here to help you with today, to help you get some clarity in what you're looking for and help you start to narrow down those 474 schools into ones that you believe will be interesting for you. So what are you going to learn during this webinar? Well, first of all, we're going to look at how your own life story might be an influence on the way you are approaching your school search process. Then we're going to look at how to create your child's wish list. So in other words, how to look at your child and come to a decision on what things are really important for a school to have in order for it to be suitable for your child. And then we're going to move to some clarity in what you're looking for by merging the review we've done in step 1 with the review we've done in step 2. And this will result in you having a bit of a mind map to show you exactly what you're looking for in a school that is tailor-made for your child. So in other words, we're going to turn confusion to clarity. So in my years of experience of working with families, all parents have one thing in common. Your child is the most precious thing, and really what you're looking for is to make sure that your child is happy in any school that you may choose. And of course you're ambitious for them to maximise their potential in areas that they are currently working in, but also to have new opportunities which they may not be aware of yet, in which they might be able to excel. And you're also looking at boarding school I would imagine, because you're very keen for your child to build life skills for the future so that they can lead an independent life and be off and launched on their own 2 feet with all the skills that they need to cope with what life may throw at them. So really, where does confusion come from? Well, in my experience, if you're feeling a little bit confused and a little unsure of where to go in terms of drawing up a list of schools that are right for your child, it's possibly because you haven't first sat down and decided exactly what you're looking for in a school before you start to look. So both parents are sometimes looking at the school choice decision from different perspectives, and so it's important really to go through a process of asking yourselves, discussing exactly what's important to you in the school that you're looking for and exactly what's important to your child, so that you draw up a picture of what you're looking for into a school. And then, in my experience, the process is far simpler because you're just looking for schools which match the criteria that you're looking for, instead of perhaps running around in circles with lots of new options emerging and not really quite knowing which ones to take forward. The other reason parents can sometimes be confused is due to information overload. I know it's very tricky when you are searching the internet for information about boarding schools, because there is so much online information out there. Not only are there the schools' websites, which do an incredible job of marketing themselves to parents and telling you their messages all about how they're different, but perhaps sometimes that just makes them all look the same. You might also be talking at dinner parties with other parents, whether you live overseas or whether you live in the UK. I know education schooling is often a topic of conversation during dinner parties, and everyone has their own opinion, own experiences of schools to share. And also your own family may be expressing their opinions. And so you can sometimes feel like your brain is about to explode because you have all these different experiences and opinions coming at you, and you're not quite sure which ones apply in your case. And the other reason that perhaps people feel confused is because a lack of knowledge. Perhaps you're a first-time buyer, perhaps you didn't go to a boarding school yourself, and so, or perhaps you live outside the British education system abroad, and hence you're not really familiar with how the system works. And so this can make it quite tricky to really understand what you're looking for, because you have a lack of knowledge and a lack of experience yourself to take forward to know what you're looking for. And then sometimes there's a fear there. There's a little voice in your head that is saying to you, I really don't know if I'm getting this right. And it's a big investment that you're making in boarding education. But also, more than that, your child is very precious and you only want what's best for them. And so there can be a little voice generating fear in your head of getting the decision wrong, and hence worrying about whether you have the confidence to move forward with applying to schools. So getting quality, supportive and experienced advice can be expensive. I know I've heard of education consultants all around the world charging up to £10,000 for quality advice. And I'm here to tell you that that's not what I'm talking to you about today. And I'm hoping that you might find this approach to getting some advice a refreshing one, and also a lot more cost effective for you. So here's my little webinar bonus for you for attending. This is a checklist which lists 21 different tips and questions to ask yourself at the start of the boarding school process, so that you can have focus to your search. So it's available here via the link now. Normally we sell this for £37, but you can download it for free today. And so if you look at the side, you will find the link coming up, and please do go ahead. It's only a limited offer available now, so please go ahead and download it. It also means that you won't need to take too many notes, because a lot of the content that I'm covering during this webinar with you today is summarised and covered in this download. So please go ahead while it's available and download it to help you move forward after the webinar. So I suppose you're probably asking yourself, who am I? Well, I have 30 plus years experience in boarding schools. I went to boarding school myself for 7 years, and then I was a teacher working in boarding schools as both a teacher and a house mistress. So I lived alongside children and learnt really from living and working with children what made them happy while they're at boarding school, which children thrived, which children struggled a little bit. I also built lots of very valued relationships with parents all around the world through looking after their children as a teacher and as a house mistress. And so that's brought me some quite valuable insights into boarding school education and really what type of child thrives in which different environment. Then as an education consultant for 16 plus years now, I have developed a passion for listening to parents. I honestly believe that advice is more about listening than it is about talking. And so really I've built years of experience of listening to parents and their worries and their concerns when it comes to boarding schools, and then helping them to move forward by suggesting solutions. And that's not always just by suggesting which schools to apply to. Often is explaining how the system works, how the application works, how to prepare your child for the entrance tests. And so it's all about a successful outcome for you. And that's where my passion for children being happy comes from, because I believe that a happy child fulfills their potential. And so really in selecting the right boarding school, the aim is to find a school where you believe that your child will be happy, be stretched, and hence they will fulfill their potential. So here's just a few little examples of clients that I've worked with over the years. So an expat British family relocating from Singapore back to the UK. When they first came to me, their two daughters were at an international school in Singapore, and one of them was prep school age, so that's at the time under 11. And the other one was looking for entry to a top all-girls senior boarding school through the 11 plus entry testing exams. And so I worked with this family over about 18-month period, helping them to prepare their daughter for the 11 plus entry tests and for the interview process, and also to find the right prep school for their daughter, which she was going to attend as a day pupil close to home, while the older daughter became a boarder at the top senior boarding school. Anyway, it was a really happy story because the older daughter gained access to the all-girls top boarding school that they were aiming for, and the younger daughter was very happily settled into a prep school, so that the aim was for her to apply to join her older sister later on when she was old enough. Here's another story of a family from South Africa with two boys, very different characters and very different abilities. And mum was very keen for her sons to apply to a top British boarding school at 13 plus. So she was keen for them to settle into the UK and into boarding school life within a prep school environment. So over a period of probably about 3 or 4 years, I helped her settle both her sons into different prep boarding schools because of their different characters and abilities, and then to support both her and her sons with successful applications to their senior boarding schools at 13 plus. And then just a final client story just to share with you at this point. I also worked with a British family whose daughter was having a very tricky time at school, and so much so she hadn't actually been to school for about 8 months when I first came into contact with this family. So via mentoring, support and guidance for both the daughter and the parents, we managed to give the daughter confidence to return to a different school. At this point, she was halfway through her GCSE course of study. So she actually managed to get 11 GCSEs all in 1 year with top exam grades, and is now very happily studying in the sixth form and again predicted top A-level grades. So I think really what I'm talking about is that this process is very much an ongoing one, working with families over a period of time. It's not just a one-size-fits-all solution and then walk away. So do please put your comments, questions, suggestions via the chat box, which you will find on your screen with the webinar. And a bit later on, we will answer some of those questions and answers. So while I'm talking, if anything pops into your head as a question, do please type it into the box, and we'll try and talk through as many questions and answers as we've got time for when we get to that point of the webinar. So let's really first get into the content really and sharing some insights with you. So step one of the confusion to clarity blueprint is really to look at your life story. Because in my experience, parents make school choices for as much about their own school experiences and influences as they do about evaluating the needs of their child. And being aware of that is really important, because it allows you to go through a process of organising your mind into all the different influences that you are experiencing at the moment, and that enables you to think them all through and to make a considered decision as to which ones are important and which ones are not. So here's a few examples. Did you love or loathe school? I mean, we've all been to school. We've all had an experience of school, and often families are perhaps put off the school they went to because they weren't very happy there, or the opposite side, they passionately want their child to go to the school they went to because they were so happy there. It's really important to understand that schools change, and so at this point in time when you are considering schools for your child, it's really important to look at all the options that are right, whether it involves the school that you went to or whether it didn't. Perhaps you are a first-time buyer into boarding school education, and so you're feeling that you lack confidence or lack knowledge to make this decision. And so it's really important to understand that that's part of your life story, and it's an important part of your life story, and it shouldn't prevent you from going ahead confidently and making the right decision for your child. Often family traditions are an influence. I've come across lots of families over the years where there's a real passion and a tradition in a family for grandparents, parents, children to all go to the same school. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you are really considering the school right now and how that school is now, because how the headmaster is there inspiring teaching, all the things that you're looking at when you're considering a school. But make sure you consider them as the school is now, not as the school was when grandpa went there. But also, your child might have very different characteristics, very different personality, very different interests to you. And so it's really important that you look at whether that school, which you have a family tradition for, is the right one for your child. So you may also have other parents. I know, particularly in prep schools, a lot of parents amongst peer groups discuss opinions on school, and some parents have very strong opinions about which schools are right or wrong. I often talk to parents about the cool schools. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, because every opinion is valid, every experience of a school is valid and very important. But it's also important to take things as you find them yourself through your own research, because in your gut, in your heart, you know what's right for your child. And so just because perhaps your child's best friend's parents have chosen a particular school for them, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll follow that it'll be the right school for your child. So you might also perhaps be outside the UK and hence feel that you're lacking opinions of other parents, as I've just mentioned. And so that can also make you feel a little bit isolated, and that you don't have access to the right support. Some parents I've also found just love to read league tables, read glossy magazine reviews, which schools have been given awards. There's lots of information online about schools and how they're ranked according to A levels and GCSEs and how many scholarships they got as a prep school. And yes, all of these things are important to take into consideration, but they're not necessarily focusing on your child. So take those in as your life story and the things that you feel are important, as well as asking yourself whether they're also important for your child. So the other things that influence really a school choice, which come from your life story, are, for example, are you both working parents? And hence you're very short of time when it comes to school pickups and the school run. Have you got younger siblings to pick up? And so logistics of family life often have to be taken into account when it comes to a school choice. And so being aware of that is very, very important, and discussing it and looking at what's possible and what isn't possible. But my advice would be just don't let those be the driver of your decision. The other parents that I've come across have been parents, perhaps sometimes mothers, perhaps more, maybe that's not fair, mothers and fathers too, struggling with the idea of boarding and your child being away from home. And I think that boarding is a massive sacrifice. And one headmaster of a prep school did once tell me that he felt that parents who choose boarding perhaps love their children the most, because they're making such a big sacrifice by choosing to give their child this fantastic opportunity to build life skills and independence and resilience for the future by attending a boarding school. But it's not easy as a parent for your child to be away from home. And so understanding the way you're feeling and acknowledging the way you're feeling about that is really important in this process, and allowing yourself to feel sad. Gosh, I remember my mother telling me when I'd been at boarding school, well, I was at boarding school for 7 years, and she only told me years later that she used to pop us on the train up to North Yorkshire from Bristol, which was a 6-hour journey with our packed lunch where we sat there and munched all our way up the train. And she used to sit there sobbing on the platform after we'd left. And I never knew that at all. I wish I had at the time. And so I think acknowledging the fact that you may be struggling with the idea of your child being away from home through boarding is a really important part of this initial process of choosing the right boarding school, because you may want to take into consideration whether you want flexi boarding, weekly boarding, full boarding as part of that thought that you might be having over being concerned about your child being away from home. So now we move on to step 2 of this process, and that is really to look at your child's wish list. So really, when you're putting your child at the centre of the type of school you're looking for, the key criteria really that you're taking into consideration are going to be: what type of school is going to make your child happy? What key elements do they need in a school for them to be happy? And that's probably down to their personality and their character. You're obviously really keen for brand new things. And the other thing really that's very important about choosing a boarding school is choosing the right school where they're going to build self-confidence, and hence they're going to maximise their potential in all the things that they try. So let's first of all look at academic factors when it comes to your child that you might want to look into. So for an example, where does your child sit within their peer group academically? Now, the best way to come at this is to ask your current school head to look at your current school reports, to talk to your current school tutor, and really listen to what they have to say to you. And often schools are doing Cat 4 testing now, which also gives you an interesting insight into where your child sits within their peer group. Because really it is no point applying to tip-top academic schools that maybe have 6, 7, 8 applications per place if your child is then going to really struggle and bumble along, because that isn't going to do a huge amount for their confidence. So really be honest with yourself at this point and ask, where does my child sit academically? Do they need a school which is really going to challenge them, that's a tip-top academic school because that's their academic level? Or do they need a school that is going to give them some extra support? Or do they need a school because they're sitting somewhere in the middle that's going to challenge them to be the best version of themselves? Also on the academic front, your child might be very strong or particularly passionate and interested in one subject. And so it's important to check that the schools you're applying to offer that subject and have inspiring teaching in that subject. And there might also be instances where your child needs extra support in other subjects, whether you need English support because English is not your child's first language, and so are they going to need extra support in that school? Does your child perhaps have a learning need like dyslexia that needs to have extra support, or ADHD that needs extra support? So whilst all these things don't define your child, it's just important to make sure that you're talking to schools that offer good, strong support in the areas where your child needs it most. If you're looking at a sixth form application, there's so much to take into consideration with sixth form, and it is something that we cover when I talk to you later about the offer that I've got available for you. But just in sort of short here, you need to be looking at whether your child is better suited to the IB, the International Baccalaureate Diploma at sixth form, or whether they're better suited to A-level subjects, and you need to make sure you're approaching schools that offer those subjects. For example, at A-level, some schools offer psychology, some offer history of art, some offer photography. It's really important to talk to schools that offer the subjects that your child... Sixth form study is very hard and very challenging, and it's important that your child can study subjects which they're passionate about and which they have an interest in, because they need to be well motivated to study hard. Likewise, are you looking at a particular senior school for entry at 13 plus? And hence, should you be looking at a prep school which has a recognised success rate at feeding into those particular senior schools? Increasingly, some prep schools are actually now part of senior schools, so that also might be something that you want to look at. For example, Bilton Grange is part of Rugby and Packwood Hall is part of Shrewsbury, etc., etc., etc. And so it might be that would be a good route to look down if you're looking at a particular senior school, and hence finding the right boarding prep school to feed into the types of school that you might be looking for. Is your child perhaps very sporty or very good at drama or very good at art, and hence you might potentially be thinking about them applying for a scholarship at 13 plus? So again, looking at the prep schools and their traditions in scholarships to particular schools might also really help you. So the next element of your child's wish list really is their current talents. So, do they currently love golf, or do they love riding, or are they really interested in computer programming or chess or karate or fencing or rugby or tennis or swimming? There's no point choosing a school, for example, in the UK if your child is a passionate swimmer if it doesn't have an indoor swimming pool. So it's really important to make sure that you look at the talents your child currently have, what inspires them, the things that they really want to attain, their own goals, and make sure that you're choosing a school that has inspiring teaching in those areas, that perhaps has coaching programs in those areas where they can really develop them. And then also, there are so many new opportunities. One of the main reasons for choosing boarding school, in my experience, is because of all the amazing new opportunities that your child can try. Developing new skills, new interests, new talents, they're all really important. And so exploring those at this point when you're researching schools could be a really good thing to do to make sure that your child is inspired by some of the new opportunities that are going to be put in front of them. Reviewing this now will also really help later on when it comes to preparing your child for the interviews, because it's going to give them lots to talk about when it comes to being interviewed by these schools that you are applying to. So again, there's more on that subject later when I talk about what I've got to offer you, because there's too much to talk about in that area right now. But these two things, current talents, passions and interests, and new opportunities, are really important later on. And then the other thing is, does your child have an ambition to become a doctor, or to develop the next new drug, or a lawyer, or whatever it is that your child is aspiring to do? It can be quite useful if you have looked at how many alumni from the school, for example, go into those areas, which university courses they go to. Because if, for example, if your child wants to be a doctor, then it's important to choose schools that have very strong academic results in the sciences. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes these things are obvious. It's just that you need to make sure that you've thought them through. So the other thing that you've got to bear in mind is your child's personality. So not all personalities thrive in a competitive environment. Some children thrive more in a more nurturing environment. I suppose we call it a sort of big fish, little pond approach. So it's really important to ask yourself, has your child got the right personality to thrive in a competitive environment? In which case, looking at competitive schools is the right road to go down. But if your child perhaps lacks confidence, maybe needs to be nurtured a little bit more, then you might want to be looking at slightly smaller schools which have a sort of slightly more family approach perhaps to boarding. Does your child make friends easily? Because again, that can be quite an important factor when it comes to looking at the type of boarding school that you're looking for, because if your child struggles to make friends, then placing them in a school which has a very competitive environment or very large year groups might make it more challenging for them to make friends. So when it comes to their character, same thing, looking at the type of boarding school can be important. So I've put here vertical versus horizontal. Vertical, this is down to how the boarding houses are set up. Whether your child goes into one boarding school at the beginning and stays there for 5 years and goes up through the year groups in that boarding house, so that boarding house has every single year group in it, or horizontal, where they are in one boarding house with their age group or perhaps 2 age groups, and then they move to another boarding house at a different age group as they progress through the school. So understanding how vertical and horizontal boarding works and which you think will be better suited for your child is quite important, because when you're researching schools, if you've decided on vertical boarding, then there's no point looking at schools which offer horizontal boarding. Again, similar thing. Some schools have family dining, so the children eat in their boarding house, so it's very much like a big family where staff come and eat with the children at lunchtime and perhaps supper, and everybody sits down together. Or you may prefer cafeteria style, where everybody picks up a tray and the endless choices of incredible food, and then they sit down where they like with their friends, and then they rush off and do their activity and whatever they do. So again, what do you think is going to be right for your child? Again, the pastoral care structure. So are there matrons in the school who look after the children in the boarding house? How does the tutor system work? How does the housemaster, housemistress system work? So investigating that pastoral care structure, because that's going to be your link as a parent with the school. If you're worried about your child, who are you going to go to ask for help? So looking at the pastoral care structure when you're researching schools, very important, and is it going to give you the reassurance that you need, particularly if you live over abroad, that you've got someone at the school that you can contact if you're worried. The other things that you might want to bear into consideration, which perhaps match up with your child's character, are: do you think your child is best suited to a single-sex school, or do you think they would thrive more in a co-ed school? Really important thing to ask yourself. Is your child's character better suited to a countryside location, or do you think that they would thrive better in a town location where they perhaps have a bit more access to the shops? than they would in the country. Obviously, there are benefits of both and there are downsides of both, but it's important to ask, what is your child most used to? Where will they most thrive? Some boarding schools are very traditional in the way they do things, and some are a lot less formal in the way they do things. So what's best suited to your child? Do you think traditional and formal, or do you think less formal? So step 3, this is the Confusion to Clarity blueprint. And this brings together everything that we've discussed so far, really. So we've combined steps 1 and 2, and you can see there your brilliant child is in the middle of our mind map. And around it, we have got all the different things that we've discussed so far. So you've got a discussion of your child's academic level. You've got their interests, their current interests, passions, their new interests, and new opportunities for them to try, their character and their personality, so what type of boarding is best going to suit that, and your child's ambitions for the future. And then you'll see there, I've got one little section that covers your parent life story, which we covered in step 1, and the things that are really important to you as a parent, as a family, logistics, all of those things all come into there. And so those factors are coming into the decision, but they're coming in alongside all those factors that you've looked into that put your child as the celebrity in your boarding school search. So here's really a summary of what you've learnt today. Considering your own life influences plus your child wish list is what's going to give you the clarity in exactly what you're looking for in a school. And I really suggest that you go away after today's webinar and give careful thought to all of the points that I've raised, because deciding on what's important to you as parents from your own life influences and your child wish list, bringing those two things together is what's going to give you a very clear picture of what you're looking for. And that is then going to help you to focus your school research so that you don't get confused. So in other words, you're making your child the celebrity of your school choice. You're putting your child at the centre of exactly what you're looking for. You're giving more weight to your child's wish list than you are to your life influences, although you are taking your life influences into account once you've discussed which ones are the most important. So now we come to a bit of a Q&A session, and let's have a little look here at some of the questions that have been coming in and which ones might be helpful. Here's something quite useful that I'm quite often asked actually by parents is, how long ahead of time do I need to apply to a boarding school? Well, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, because sometimes you can apply right up till August at the last minute for places. Perhaps if your work circumstances suddenly change and you have to make a sudden change of school, it is possible to ring round schools and find places at the last minute. But let's take into account now that maybe you are watching this webinar because you're well organised and you're wanting to plan well ahead of time. And I would say that probably 18 months is the ideal time to give you the opportunity to really research your schools well and go through that process, and then organise visits and ask all the questions and come up with a short list and go through the registration process, application, interview, testing, and then get your child ready for joining boarding school. I'd say probably 18 months, 12 months is maybe the optimum time, but that doesn't mean to say that it can't also be done at the last minute. Here's again quite a useful question that sometimes actually I'm asked quite a lot by parents is, can my child join a boarding school out of year group? And the answer to that question is yes, but it depends on the school. And so a child's age for joining a school is calculated based on the 1st of September in any year, and the age that they will turn between the 1st of September and the 31st of August, which is a whole school year. So for example, for reception, your child will turn 5 during that reception year, 6 during year 1, they'll turn 7 during year 2, and so on. I probably confused you already. We do actually have a very useful app. If you go to the App Store, and look up what school year, it's a free app that you can download, and you put your child's date of birth in and it tells you which school year they're in. But a lot of schools will take an application for a child who's slightly older their year group. But if your child has an autumn birthday and hence they're almost 2 years too old, that can be trickier than if they have a summer birthday. And particularly if children have English as a second language, a school might suggest that the child goes back a year in order to give them longer to learn English and settle into the school before the serious work starts. Here's another question that is quite an interesting question, again asked quite often. How many schools shall I apply to? And my answer there is really not too many, because the more schools you apply to, the more confused you will become. If you go through this process very carefully in looking at exactly what it is that you're looking for, you ought to be able to narrow down the number of schools that you're applying to perhaps 3, maximum 4. Any more than that, you need to consider, 1, the stress that you're putting your child under because you're putting them through all those tests and interviews. But 2, if you're having to apply to more than 3 or 4 schools, you probably haven't done your research process well enough to narrow down the choice. So you probably want to have maybe 2 ambitious choices that you know are really going to stretch your child and really that's what you're going to aim for. And then maybe a backup choice that you still would be really happy for your child to attend, but maybe it's not quite so competitive for entry. So I would say 3 is ideal, maximum 4, no more than that. Let's look here. Other questions. Yes. Here's one I'm often asked. How will my child be assessed for entry? Well, again, that's something that very much varies from school to school. So increasingly schools are using online assessment tests which look at non-verbal reasoning, verbal reasoning, math skills, perhaps some comprehension, as well as interviewing your child to see if they are going to be the right sort of child to be happy and settle and take advantage of all the amazing opportunities that boarding schools have to offer. So, but sometimes the schools will be giving paper tests. If you live abroad, some schools will allow your child to be tested in their school that they are in abroad or at a British Council office. But with the best way is to come over and visit the school so that your child gets the opportunity to meet both you and your child. So if that is feasible, that would always be preferable. But if you can't come over and visit, perhaps time is short, as I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier questions. If time is short, then a Skype interview, Zoom interview is sometimes an option, and testing at the British Council in your own country or at your own child's school. So that's it for the Q&A right now. So here we are. As I promised earlier, I'm going to make an offer to you. So years of working with parents all over the world, I've realised that it's quite tricky if you live the other side of the world and you are looking for quality advice, because you're in a different time zone and you need the advice to be at the time you want it and accessible right now, because that's when you're looking for it. So I'm here to tell you that that's exactly what you can do. So here's our webinar special offer. Applying to British boarding school, give me 7 days and I'll share all my secrets with you. So you can work with me via our online course. The price is usually $1,997, but as a special offer, as valued webinar attendees, you can currently buy it for $1,497. And I've mentioned quite a lot as I've been going. I hope I haven't sort of blown your mind with information. And I do strongly believe that the applying to boarding school process is very much easier if you work through it step by step. So what I've run with you today is the very beginning, which is looking at the type of school that you're looking for, exactly what do you need to give you clarity. But in the course, I work with you through the whole process from start to finish. So researching schools, we work through all of that. We work through how to come up with your shortlist, where to look for schools. There are opportunities for you to consult one of our consultancy teams so that you don't get stuck, to make sure that they can help you to get the right schools onto your list, depending on what you're looking for. You get access to their expertise. There's also a whole module on school visits, how to plan them. There are checklists for before you visit, who to meet when you go, questions to ask when you visit, how to compare the schools after the visits. There's also an awful lot of information within the course on how to prepare your child for the entry tests and interviews, including practice questions for interview. There's some videos to help your child to prepare. There's resources, there's lists of resources on where to find practice tests for your child. And then this one is often forgotten, and I think this is really important when it comes to boarding, is once you've accepted your offers, how do you prepare your child to get them ready for joining a boarding school? And once they're there, how do you support them? How do you settle them in? How do you deal with things like homesickness? And so this course covers everything from start to finish, holding your hand. And because of this special offer, you're going to save £500 if you invest in the course right now. You'll find there's a link to go through to buy it. And the great thing, as I mentioned earlier, is you don't need to wait for me to be available to speak to you. You can get started right now. You can have access to my help, my support right this minute, if you use the link that you will find to purchase the course. And I guess you're probably asking, but does this mean that I'm going to be making this huge boarding school decision process on my own? Well, no, it doesn't, because I've had a lot of experience of supporting families just like you, and I know that may well be points that you will get stuck in this process. And so the course price includes 3 Zoom calls with one of our experts. So that means that you can feel reassured that if you get stuck at any point in that process that I've just talked you through, you can arrange a Zoom call with myself or one of my team, whoever's the best one to help you in terms of expertise and what you're looking for, and we will help you get unstuck. We will help you at each point to make sure that you feel confident that you are making the right choice. But the big difference is, because you can access a lot of this advice at any time, anywhere, from the comfort of your own sofa, you can work through it in your own time, whether you've got 2 months or whether you've got 2 years. You have lifetime access to this course, so you can work your way through it at your own time. But you can have up to 3 Zoom calls within the first 3 months with one of our experts, just in case you get stuck. So I think I've probably kept you away from your busy life for long enough. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for attending. I do appreciate your time, and I will look forward to seeing you in the course. Thanks for listening.